Concrete walls, a mile-long tunnel carved through solid earth, a billion-dollar empire built in the shadows. He escaped the impossible twice. From the mountains of Badiraguato to the top of the Sinaloa Cartel. This is the true story of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán, a man who humiliated governments, a ghost who vanished beneath concrete floors, a kingpin who triggered a global manhunt, and the prison built to make sure he never escapes again. Welcome to Silent Cartel Files. There's a mother in Sinaloa who still remembers the night the gunshots wouldn't stop. There's a prison guard who swears he heard nothing, yet somehow the most powerful drug lord on earth vanished into the ground. And there's a little boy from the mountains who once stood barefoot in the dust, staring at a world that offered him nothing, and decided he would take everything. This is the beginning of the story of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán. Before the billions, before the bloodshed, before the tunnels, there was hunger. Joaquín Guzmán was born in 1957 in Badiraguato, deep in the rugged mountains of Sinaloa. The land was beautiful but unforgiving, steep cliffs, dry soil, winding dirt roads that seemed to lead nowhere. His family was poor, not the kind of poor that means fewer luxuries, the kind that means empty plates and cracked hands from working fields that barely gave anything back. School was not a priority, survival was. In those mountains, there was one crop that always paid: opium poppies, marijuana. The drug trade wasn't hidden, it was woven into daily life. Boys grew up watching men count cash under dim lights. They saw trucks disappear into the night. They learned early that the fastest way out of poverty was also the most dangerous. As a teenager, Guzmán began working for local traffickers, small tasks at first, guarding shipments, transporting packages, learning who to trust and who to fear. He was quiet, observant, calculating. The nickname came later, El Chapo, slang for shorty. He wasn't physically imposing, but he didn't need to be. In the 1980s, Mexico's drug world was controlled by powerful figures. One of them was Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, known as El Padrino. Under his umbrella, trafficking routes expanded across Mexico into the United States. Guzmán became part of that system. He studied logistics like a businessman studies markets. He paid attention to border weaknesses, to corrupt officials, to timing and movement. He understood something critical. Violence gains territory, but infrastructure keeps it. When Félix Gallardo was arrested in 1989, the empire fractured, territory was divided, power shifted, and chaos creates opportunity. Guzmán aligned himself with rising partners and helped form what would become the Sinaloa Cartel. What started as a regional operation began transforming into something larger, more organized, more strategic, more global. Cocaine flowed north from Colombia, heroin moved across deserts, marijuana shipments crossed hidden paths. Later, methamphetamine labs multiplied. The cartel built routes through tunnels, highways, rail systems, and even aircraft. They bribed police, politicians, and border agents. Entire systems bent under the weight of corruption. Money poured in. By the early 1990s, Guzmán was no longer just a trafficker. He was a key architect of an expanding empire. But power breeds enemies. In 1993, violence erupted at the Guadalajara airport during a shootout between rival factions. The chaos intensified pressure from authorities. Soon after, Guzmán was captured in Guatemala and extradited back to Mexico. For many, that should have been the end. He was sentenced to decades behind bars and placed in a maximum security prison. But prison walls mean little when corruption runs deep.
Reports later suggested that Guzmán continued directing operations from inside his cell. Guards were paid, privileges were granted, messages flowed in and out. Outside the prison, the Sinaloa Cartel continued expanding. Inside, El Chapo waited. And then, in 2001, something happened that would cement his legend forever. He disappeared. Official reports claimed he escaped hidden inside a laundry cart. Other versions say bribery opened doors that should never have opened. However it happened, one fact was undeniable. Mexico's most notorious drug lord had walked free. Humiliation spread across the government. Headlines exploded. A bounty was placed on his head. But in the mountains of Sinaloa, whispers turned into admiration. The man who escaped the system. The ghost who slipped through concrete and steel. For the next decade, Guzmán operated in the shadows. Safe houses, remote ranches, loyal guards forming human shields around him. The cartel expanded aggressively during this period. Strategic alliances were formed, rivals were eliminated, smuggling operations became more sophisticated. Authorities in both Mexico and the United States intensified their pursuit. The United States Department of Justice built cases, intelligence agencies tracked communications, informants were flipped, yet El Chapo remained elusive. In 2009, something extraordinary happened. The business magazine Forbes listed him among the world's billionaires. A drug lord from a mountain village now ranked beside global CEOs. It was surreal. But beneath the headlines, violence escalated across Mexico. Cartel wars tore through cities, families were displaced, communities lived in fear of crossfire. The empire had grown too large to move silently. By 2014, after years of pursuit, Mexican authorities closed in. Acting on intelligence, they raided a hotel in Mazatlan. This time, Guzmán did not escape. He was captured and transferred to Altiplano prison, a facility designed for the most dangerous criminals. Security was tighter, monitoring was constant, surveillance was relentless. Or so they thought, because the story of El Chapo was far from over. In the silence beneath concrete floors, plans were already being drawn. A tunnel, a motorcycle on rails, ventilation systems, precise measurements aligned to a prison shower. The world didn't know it yet, but the ground was about to open, and the legend was about to grow even bigger.
On July 11th, 2015, inside a maximum security facility built to cage the worst criminals in Mexico, Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán bent down, disappeared from camera view for a few seconds, and vanished. No alarms, no gunfire, no broken doors, just an empty shower and a hole in the ground. Nearly a mile-long tunnel had been carved through solid earth. It stretched from outside the prison walls directly into his cell block. It had ventilation systems, lighting, and a rail-mounted motorcycle designed to move quickly through the narrow passage. Precision, funding, patience. The tunnel wasn't just an escape route, it was a statement. The world woke up to headlines of disbelief. A second escape from a federal maximum security prison. The humiliation was global. The Mexican government faced outrage. How could the most notorious criminal in the country outsmart the system again? But this time, something felt different. This wasn't just about corruption. This was defiance. Within hours, a massive manhunt began. Federal forces deployed across highways, airports were locked down, border crossings tightened, checkpoints multiplied across Sinaloa and neighboring regions. Helicopters scanned mountains, intelligence units traced phone signals, associates were detained and interrogated. Meanwhile, El Chapo was moving. Safe houses shifted constantly, convoys rotated, communications were minimal and coded.
He returned to the terrain he knew best, the mountains. But the world watching in 2015 was not the world of 2001. Technology had evolved, surveillance had intensified, and the stakes were higher. The United States increased pressure. The United States Department of Justice coordinated closely with Mexican authorities. Intelligence sharing became aggressive. Financial networks were tracked. Digital footprints were analyzed. Every call mattered. Every signal mattered. One reported vulnerability changed everything. After years of hiding from technology, Guzmán allegedly reached out to people outside his trusted inner circle. There were reports that he had communicated with intermediaries connected to film and media figures, intrigued by the idea of telling his story. Whether driven by ego or legacy, that contact exposed movement. Investigators traced communications patterns. Locations narrowed. In October 2015, Mexican Marines launched an operation in the mountains near Tamazula. A fierce gunfight erupted between security forces and cartel gunmen. El Chapo escaped again that day, slipping through a storm drain, injured but alive. But now the circle was closing. Months passed. Pressure intensified. More arrests, more raids. His trusted network was shrinking. Then, in January 2016, authorities received intelligence pointing to a safe house in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. Before dawn, Mexican Marines surrounded the building. Gunfire exploded through the quiet neighborhood. Windows shattered. Bullets tore through walls. Cartel bodyguards fought desperately to buy time. Inside, Guzmán tried to flee through another tunnel system connected to the house. He moved through sewage lines, emerging blocks away. But this time, there was no prepared convoy waiting, no mountain trail to disappear into. He attempted to hijack a vehicle on the street. He was intercepted. Dirty, exhausted, cornered. After nearly 6 months on the run, El Chapo was captured again. This time, there would be no second chance. He was returned to Altiplano under intensified security, but trust in the system was shattered. The decision was made swiftly. He would be extradited. In January 2017, Guzmán was transferred to the United States, shackled, surrounded by armed agents. The man who once commanded armies of gunmen now moved under fluorescent lights in complete silence. He was transported to New York City to stand trial in federal court. The courtroom was fortified. Jurors were anonymous. Security was overwhelming. Over months, prosecutors detailed the scale of the empire built under the Sinaloa Cartel banner. Witnesses described tons of cocaine moved across borders. They described bribery at the highest levels. They described murders ordered without hesitation. Former allies testified against him. Cartel insiders explained logistics. Engineers described tunnel systems that rivaled infrastructure projects. The myth was stripped away piece by piece. What remained was structure, organization, ruthless efficiency. In February 2019, the verdict came. Guilty on all major counts: drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy, continuing criminal enterprise. The sentence was life in prison plus 30 years, no parole. He was transferred to ADX Florence, a Supermax facility in Colorado, known as one of the most secure prisons in the world. There are no tunnels beneath those floors, no open shower blind spots, no bribed guards unlocking doors. In ADX Florence, inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement. Concrete walls, steel doors, minimal human contact. The man who once traveled in armored convoys through mountain roads now walks a few steps inside a silent cell. Outside, the world moved on. The Sinaloa Cartel did not collapse. Power redistributed. Leadership evolved. Violence shifted, but did not vanish. Empires like this rarely die with one man, but something else ended in that Colorado cell. The legend of the untouchable escape artist. The second tunnel had elevated him into myth. The final capture returned him to reality. A barefoot boy from Badiraguato once looked at the mountains and saw opportunity. Decades later, concrete walls became his horizon. No tunnels left to dig.
No borders left to cross. Only silence and history. There is a strange silence in Supermax prisons. No shouting, no chaos, no crowds. Just the sound of ventilation systems and the echo of footsteps that never go far. Inside a concrete cell at ADX Florence, the man once known as the most powerful drug trafficker in the world wakes up alone. No mountains, no armed convoys, no radios buzzing with coded messages, just walls. This is where the story of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán settles into stillness. But outside those walls, his shadow remains, because empires built over decades do not vanish overnight. After his conviction in 2019, leadership within the Sinaloa Cartel shifted. Power did not collapse, it fragmented and restructured. Old allies maneuvered, family members stepped forward, rival factions calculated their chances. Among the names that emerged were Guzmán's own sons, often referred to as Los Chapitos. They had grown up surrounded by wealth and protection, raised inside the machinery of the cartel. They inherited not just influence, but enemies. In Sinaloa, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Loyalty was tested. Internal fractures appeared between traditional leadership figures and the younger generation seeking control. The capture of El Chapo had not ended the war. It had changed its shape. Meanwhile, the global drug market was evolving. Methamphetamine production expanded. Fentanyl trafficking surged. Synthetic drugs began reshaping the crisis across North America. Investigators argued that the infrastructure Guzmán helped build, smuggling routes, corruption networks, distribution systems, made this transition easier. The architecture remained, even without the architect. In 2019, months after Guzmán's sentencing, violence erupted in Culiacán. Mexican security forces attempted to detain one of his sons. Gunmen flooded the streets, vehicles burned, roadblocks paralyzed the city. The empire has transformed, and the man once called untouchable now measures his world in steps across a concrete floor. Was hunger, was escape, is consequence. But consequence does not erase legacy, it freezes it. For Silent Cartel Files, this is where the myth meets reality. A barefoot boy from the mountains became a global symbol of organized crime. He built an empire beneath the earth, and in the end, the earth closed behind him. Power built in darkness never truly disappears. It shifts, it adapts, it waits. The story of Joaquín El Chapo Guzmán is not just about tunnels and escapes. It's about ambition without limits and the consequences that follow. From the mountains of Badiraguato to the concrete silence of ADX Florence, the empire changed the world, whether the world was ready or not. And this is only one file. If you want the truth behind the shadows, if you want the stories they tried to bury, subscribe to Silent Cartel Files, because in the silence, the real story speaks.